I hope you can make good use of some of the blank paper or or your iPad or something else to jot down the important notes if necessary. OK，咁咧通常一個禮拜後啦，咁通常係禮拜三後，例如可能係四五，咁佢就同學可以再問我，下個禮拜四五可以問我攞翻呢一個 video clip，因為做一啲 editing 咁樣啦。咁所以同學都係如果有需要想去做功課嘅時候，可能都係要 jot down notes，咁對同學嘅時間控制會比較有利嘅。So naturally, I hope classmates can jot down the notes on the blank paper or on your iPad or something else on your desk or on your computer. So regarding the gender diary, you need to understand it will be considered as a kind of the so-called additional assignment that will have the quiz nature in the past. That means there is no consultation after this particular lecture. So, and for the first half of this lecture, I'm going to explain the question 1, 2, and 3 of the gender diary, or so-called the additional assignment. So if you have the simple questions and of course, if I'm allowed to do so, or especially by answering your questions according to the fairness principle, I will try to answer classmate questions before the 10 minutes break. That means in the middle of this lecture. Okay, may I try to explain some of the important guidelines regarding that kind of the gender diary. Regarding the gender diary, please follow the guidelines first. Classmates will be required to pick up 1 out of 3 questions to answer accordingly. Make sure that you are not required to answer all 3 questions. 咁同學需要係3條揀1條嚟答嘅啫，唔係3條答晒嘅。咁以前係有同學做錯過嘅，咁所以提一提同學。咁呢3條題目，如果同學睇翻咧喺對下咧，其實第一條題目咧就係 embodiment 嗰課，即係 gender performativity 嗰個 PowerPoint 嘅。咁另外第2條咧就係 masculinities， 我即將會講嘅。第3條咧就係我哋啱啱講嘅 sexualities 嗰課 PowerPoint， 講 Michelle Foucault power over the body 啊 ，power of the body 啊嗰個 PowerPoint 嘅，係啦。咁3條題目咧都係要點咧？嚇 ，regarding the flow to do this kind of the questions, our classmate will be required to read the assigned reading first, and hence to answer the questions in these 2 pages. And in the past, the teachers of this subject team would not explain that kind of the assigned reading. But for this semester, to cater for the classmates' needs or according to the classmate interests, 尤其同學比較擔心會唔會高分嘅問題啊，或者係咪喺呢一個嘅 online reading 或者 online learning 會唔會有可能困難或者可能有啲問題啊？咁所以我同之前嘅做法會唔同嘅呢一科，咁我哋會係去解呢啲嘅 assigned reading。咁但係同學講過啦嚇，因為呢一個係一個嘅balance 嘅做法，係要 balance 翻呢一個嘅 quiz 同埋呢一個嘅quiz 嘅 nature 嘅功課同埋呢一個嘅fairness principle， 咁亦都同學嘅利益幾樣嘢，咁所以我哋呢一個嘅 explanation of the assigned reading 只會做一次嘅啫，同埋係唔會有錄影嘅嚇。Make sure that the explanation of the assigned reading would not be recorded because of striking the balance between the quiz nature assignment, that means the gender diary, and also the classmate interest, especially how to obtain higher marks especially under the new grading system with A-. OK， 咁其實咧，我突然間轉頭會解俾同學聽，喺下堂會解俾同學聽嘅，就唔係今日啦。咁我哋下堂就應該理論上會解到 question 2，甚至係 question 3嘅，睇一睇時間啦嚇。如果唔得 question 3就要再下一堂㗎啦，係啦。咁咧呢一份功課咧，咁我哋個 deadline 啦就係呢一個嘅嚇。Make sure that the deadline will be set in the last day of our semester. So that means classmate would I've already distributed this kind of the question paper 1 week before. That means classmate will have around 1 month to answer that's kind of the question, and make sure that it will be considered as a kind of the additional assignment. So there's no need for classmates to include any academic references in APA format. I repeat, there is no need for classmates to include any academic references in APA format， 因為呢一份係考試測驗性質嘅功課，所以當然啦，考試嘅時候點會有 in-text citations， 點會有 references 咧？所以呢份功課咧係同學唔需要用 APA 嘅 format 去包括任何嘅 in-text citations 或者係 references 嘅。咁樣做係可以，但唔會特別有額外嘅分加。你話或多或少有冇少少咧？咁如果幫助到你答題係會有嘅。咁但係以往的確有同學係因為攞 A grade 或者係而冇做到任何嘅 academic reference 嘅。What I concern for the general diary would just be its writing quality, but not how many references that you will be able to include in your assignment。咁同埋呢份功課咧係因為係 additional assignment 啦，咁所以係會學校睇得好緊嘅嚇。So make sure that 5 p.m. will be the so-called rigid or rigid deadline or time for you to submit that kind of the assignment. In other words, if you submit that kind of the assignments 1 second or even 1 minute later, marks will be deducted accordingly, and your case will be passed to the panel。因為呢一個嘅 assignment 係有測驗嘅性質，咁只要遲1分鐘甚至1秒，咁都要 pass 俾 panel 去處理遲交嘅問題嘅。咁所以唔好當係5點交係啦，因為系統係用系統係計佢時間，唔話幾秒嘅1分鐘，咁係用系統去睇嘅啫。所以同學最好當係4點鐘係去呢一個嘅 deadline 會好啲啦，或者4點半就唔好當係5點鐘跟住遲交同我講，我做唔到任何嘢，因為 record 咧喺 Moodle 係好清楚顯示嘅，而係有考試性質嘅功課咧，學校落得好緊嘅呢樣嘢係啦。咁老師係冇任何嘅決定權嘅，唔係淨係呢一科嘅。咁所以請同學注意翻啦。So you should submit the deadline before 5 o'clock in the rigid way on that particular day。同學可唔可以閂翻咪？唔該。係啦，咁另外呢個同學要注意翻啦。係，咁我哋再睇一睇個 wordings 啦。Regarding that kind of the wordings, make sure that the maximum wordings will be 1500 words. And that kind of the questions will be divided into 2 parts. For the first part, it will be about the summary as highlighted in the first half of your question. For the second part, it will be highlighted as the reflection. And for the details, it will be highlighted in the following questions as well. 咁呢一兩條嘅呢啲嘅題目咧，每一條咧唔理你揀 question 1、question 2或者 question 3，咁都係分為2部分嘅。第一部分我哋會話咩咧 ？For the first half, it will be about the summary。咁頭半部分就係 summary 嚟嘅。咁將呢個 details 就喺個 question 下邊會睇得好清楚㗎啦。咁關於嗰個嘅 reflection 就第二部分啦。And regarding the second half of the question, it will be about the reflection. And how about the writing skill, or what will be the content to be included in the reflection? You may try to refer the details of the following question as well as the sample reflection A and B that I've already discussed and given you in the previous lecture on Moodle, as well as in Teams explanation。咁同學應該記得我係有解過2篇，就係花花女郎選舉同埋選美同會考嘅關係。咁嗰個都係同學可以學習點樣寫嘅。咁因為呢一份功課已經俾咗字數嘅彈性俾同學啦。And make sure that 1500 words will be the maximum words limit. If the classmate would include that kind of the words, say for example in 1501 words, marks will be deducted directly without period notice。只要多一粒字1501字，咁我哋都會係扣分㗎啦，因為已經彈性到俾咗同學㗎啦。咁呢一個係上限嚟嘅。咁就千祈唔好多過呢一個字啦。咁我會用電腦去睇翻究竟有冇多過嗰個字數嘅，係啦。咁我都俾同學睇一睇嗰個嘅 template 啦，同學可以睇一睇嘅。So I think it's better for me to let you know what will be the answering method regarding that kind of the cover page template or main content template for your understanding. On Moodle, you will be able to further pick out that kind of the template, and classmate will be required to answer according to that kind of the APA cover page as well as the main content template。如果同學係冇跟到自己去打字，然後跟住打漏咗資料或者唔跟嘅，只要少咗一樣資料，咁我哋都會照扣分，係啦呢一樣嘢。咁所以同學記住要跟翻呢個 template 去打嘅，因為我見到 assignment 1或者 assignment 2有同學係冇跟 template 去做嘅。咁呢一個情況係有部分嘅情況我啲資料我都跟唔到，所以有啲機會係有機會會扣咗分，或者係有啲情況發生咗。咁所以同學記住跟翻呢份功課 guidelines 做啦，尤其是呢一份功課係一份有考試性質、測驗性質嘅功課嚟嘅。好啦 ，and regarding that kind of the cover page, classmate will be required to indicate whether or not you would like to opt for question 1, question 2. Or even question 3 for that kind of the assignment。咁如果你揀 question 1，咁 question 2同3係點啊 ？Try to delete that kind of the words and try to fill in your student name as well as your student ID according to your student ID card。咁如果你嘅 tutorial class number 咧 ，how about for your tutorial class number? For this class, it will be A01A or A01B or A02A, A02B, A02C or A02D。一行一係呢班係 A02 班嚟嘅，咁你哋一係 A02A、A02B、A02C 或者 A02D， 咁寫清楚你哋嘅 tutorial class number 啦。好啦，咁咧喺嗰個嘅 main content template 同之前嘅做法唔同，咁呢一個好清楚嘅，寫得好清楚，咁同要跟啦。嚇 ，classmate will be required answer the questions that will be divided into 2 parts. For the part 1, you need to answer in that kind of the blank space, and after that you need to count the words for me。咁我會再揾電腦再睇一睇個數字有冇問題嘅，不過同我要寫先。And for part 2, you should do the same thing. After complete that kind of the reflection question, classmate will be required to fill in the word count, and of course I will try to make good use of the Word document function to count that kind of the words。咁同學當然啦，去交呢份功課嘅時候需要交 DOCX 嘅，到時應該交 PDF 係交唔到嘅，我 set 咗個條款限制㗎啦。咁同學記住係交 DOCX 啦，唔好交 PDF 啦。And make sure that you need to answer that kind of the questions that will be divided into part 1 and part 2. It implies if classmates answer that kind of the part 1 and part 2 question together, not some marks but the severe marks will be deducted。咁同學係需要分兩 part 去回答問題嘅。咁如果係唔係分開作答，而係撈埋作答，唔係會扣少少分，係會有大量嘅分數扣嘅，因為會好混亂嘅。我會同你執翻個答案出嚟嘅。咁所以呢樣嘢係請同學唔好犯錯啦。以往有同學犯錯扣好多分嘅，係啦，係唔止一個 subgrade 嘅嚇，同學講係啦，係多過一個 subgrade 嘅，係啦。咁一定會影響 final grade 㗎啦。如果咁嘅情況係啦。好，咁我哋再繼續睇啦。And regarding that kind of the paper, classmates should submit in the Word document format on Moodle, but not by email. And make sure that that kind of the assignment should be put down in English. No Chinese characters would be allowed in any circumstance. So for the late submission, you need to follow that kind of the guidelines, and 10% of the marks will be deducted per day. Say for example, if you submit that kind of the assignment at 5:01, say for example, 1 minute after the deadline, marks will be deducted. I mean the 10% of your marks will be deducted. That means 5 p.m. will be the cut-off time of that particular day. 咁喺每一日嘅5點就晏晝5點就係嗰個 cut-off time 啦。咁如果去到10號之後你唔使交㗎啦，因為直接俾0分嘅，係啦。所以同學要知道嗰個 submission time. So and you need to understand that's kind of the deadline as well as the late submission of assignment arrangement in the rigid way. So please mark down that's kind of the important reminder on your diary. And may I remind you again, there is no need for you to include the academic references in this assignment because of its quiz nature. 因為呢份功課係有測驗性質，同我記住係唔需要 academic reference 嘅，唔需要 academic reference 嘅。No academic references will be required for this assignment, and of course, no consultation will be provided after this particular lecture. Okay, it will be the arrangement for all teachers in this subject team. Any questions so far for the assignment guidelines? 如果同學有問題，而家需要問啦。If you have questions, you need to ask me now. 有冇 limitation 同 file name 嗰啲？file name 冇，但係 font size 要跟翻我哋嘅呢一個 file 嘅。咁 line spacing 都係跟翻而家呢個 file 係啦，你只要打得㗎啦。所以叫同學唔好自己開一個新嘅。You need to follow that kind of the template to type your answer. All of the fonts, font size, and line spacing will be set already. Okay? 有冇 any other questions for the guidelines？ 逐步嚟，我解答俾同學知先啦嚇。一陣間會俾同學再問 question 1 to 3嘅。Okay, may I try to answer 佩奇 question? If classmate, the word limit for the first part of your question is over 750, marks will be deducted. Okay? Any questions so far? 因為今年有 A 減，同學要知道啦，因為今年有 A 減啊，咁所以我點解我會解 reading 俾同學聽？我都係想同學可以係喺 B 加以往 B 加嘅部分推上去 A 減嗰度多啲，因為以往咁多份 assignment 呢一份 assignment 其實我睇翻係最唔理想嘅，咁所以我哋今年係唔只有 reflection 加埋咗 summary， 咁字數當然要俾多少少同學啦嚇，咁。因為如果咪做唔到 summary， 但我又解俾同學知，好似上次 question 1嘅 reading 咁，咁就希望同學可以高啲分嘅。咁但係以往其實呢一份功課個 min mark 一啲都唔理想嘅，其實係啦。最好嘅係 group project， 咁係但係最差嘅係呢一個嘅情況，係啦。唔會唔小心寫錯嘅，睇清楚咪唔會寫錯咯，係啦。A01。係最緊要你 A 你唔會寫錯嘅，你哋係啊，我暫時都冇乜見過同學寫錯，以往小心啲啦嚇，呢一份係考試功課嚟㗎嚇，你寫錯少少我都唔會扣你分嘅呢啲係啦。但係如果呢一份功課我唔知啊，所有嘢呢份功課學校及得好緊，以往有同學遲交就要我哋 forward 俾 panel 啦，係啦，咁的確係咁就。處理得係應該咁講，佢係冇任何人情味啦，你可以咁講係啊，所以我覺得呢一方面同我喺其他功課佢有嘅，呢一份功課真係冇喺其中一個 semester， 我唔記得係 Sem 1定 Sem 2啦，唔係新碼嘅，而會講嘅呢個會講嘅嚇。I will try to let you know what will be the concepts as well as the theories to be regulated or required for the assignment. I will try to explain in the later questions in question 1, 2, and 3. No need to worry. I will try to explain accordingly. 係啦，盡量小心啦，係啦，同學，係啦。Any questions so far for the guidelines? Okay, if you don't have any questions, I will try to explain the requirements of the questions from 1 to 3 accordingly. To respond for the classmate questions, if you would like to refer to that kind of the question paper, you'll be able to understand that kind of the question from one to other. Say for example, question 1, it will be the required concepts and theories. Question 2, it will be the required concept and theories. For question 3, it will be required the concept and theories. I've already highlighted accordingly for your further understanding. And that is very different with the assignment 1, assignment 2, and assignment 3 requirement. There is no any kinds of the so-called you need to apply 3 or 4 as the minimum gender concept or theories in your assignment。同 assignment 1、2、3嘅情況唔同，我哋唔會話最少用3個或者4個嘅，咁要用咩 concept 或者 theory 寫咗喺每一條題目度，咁同學跟翻題目就 OK 啦。So regarding that kind of the gender concept and theories, classmates should follow that kind of the questions requirement accordingly. Of course, question 1, question 2, and question 3 will have different kinds of the gender concepts or theories requirement. And for classmates, you should particularly bear in mind the structure of that kind of the question. If you would like to refer to the guidelines, for the first part, it will be about the summary of the particular assigned reading. For the part 2 or the second half of that particular question or your assignment writing, it will be about the reflection based on your assigned reading. Say, for example, to link up with your personal gender experience. So in every question, part 1, part 2, so for every question, say, for example, question 1, you'll be able to dig out the requirements of question 1, part 1, question 1, part 2. For question 2, similar situation would occur again. Part 1 of the question 2 requirement, part 2 of the question 2 requirement. 第3條都係一樣啦，都係分為 part 1同埋 part 2嘅。咁我會逐部分去解俾同學知道嘅。好啦，我哋睇一睇第一條題目先啦。So for the question 1, I've already explained that kind of the readings regarding the culture, nature, and everyday life in the previous lecture. That means the last week lecture. I've already explained that kind of the PDF readings during the last week lecture from page to page, from paragraph to paragraph. 同學應該有 underline 到㗎啦。So inside that kind of the reading, I would like to ask how you can understand the good of the nature or the good of the nurture, especially in the gender issues. 喺 gender issue 裏邊，呢篇文章佢係講緊係呢一個 nature 重要啲啊，定係呢一個嘅 nurture 重要啲啊 ？Which one that would be considered as the more important one？ 同學可唔可以答我啊？ Nature or nurture that would be more important to be considered in the question 1 reading, as explained in the last week lecture. 冇錯啦，敏琪講得好啱啦，係啦，係 nurture 重要啲啦。幾位同學接住落嚟都答得好啱啦 ，nurture。所以我哋會話咩啊 ？That is the crucial reason why we would like to make good use of the nurture explanation to explain the body in the everyday context。所以我哋去理解，我哋係要用後天嘅原因，即係一啲嘅文化力量啦。同學可以抄低呢一句啦，喺 chat room 睇一睇，我打嘅。That is so according to the importance of nurture, classmates will be required to explain that kind of the body in everyday life context according to the cultural forces or so-called cultural norms and values。因為文化力量或者係一啲文化嘅價值，或者係一啲嘅規範，其實係一啲後天嘅一啲好重要嘅元素，或者係一個例子啦嚇。咁我哋就嘗試係用呢一樣嘅東西。文化嘅力量，或者一啲文化上嘅規範，或者係一啲嘅價值觀，係去解釋我哋日常生活，我哋例如可能 body 點解會咁樣做，唔會咁樣做，即係話我哋係用一啲後天嘅 explanation 去解釋一啲先天嘅嘢，用一啲文化力量，我哋去解釋點解我哋嘅身體、我哋嘅器官、我哋嘅手腳會咁樣喐，唔係有另一種喐法，或者係做某樣嘢唔去做某一樣嘢，其實係有文化力量所去促使嘅。咁有時候係 intentionally， 有時候係 unintentionally 啦。And of course, that's kind of the cultural forces and or so-called cultural norms and values will be able to affect our body movement or activities in the everyday life context. Sometimes according to the intentional situation, sometimes unintentionally。 有時候故意，有時候潛意識地影響緊我哋身體嘅動作，做 A 嘅動作，唔做 B 嘅動作，或者決定咁樣做或者唔做某啲嘢，同我哋嘅當然同 gender issues 有關，亦都同 social class 有關嘅。咁同學要注意翻呢樣嘢啦。咁喺呢篇文章裏邊，我哋會留意到呢一句嘅。喺呢篇文章裏邊，我哋會留意到呢一句嘅，highlight 住呢一句啦。咁同學就可以睇頭先我解釋緊呢一樣嘢啦，就係點樣去利用文化力量係去解釋呢一個身體嘅一啲嘅動作。咁當然身體嘅一啲動作，我哋嘅身體就係咩啊？就係一啲叫做 biologically determined 嘅 behaviors 啦。即係話我哋係用咩啊 ？For this statement, you will be required to try to discuss and explain how we can make good use of the cultural forces to explain that kind of the so-called bodies in the everyday life context or the so-called biologically determined behavior。咁我哋可能同學咧就要討論翻呢一篇文章嘅 summary 啦。So following that kind of the statement, classmates will be required to discuss accordingly. Of course, according to different kinds of the gender concepts and theories. And in the very beginning, may I draw your attention about that kind of the question wordings? Discuss. What will be the meanings of such a question wording? Discuss. Discuss 嘅話係咪就咁講 how 㗎？係咪啊 ？Yes or no？ 係啦，唔係啦，同學覺得我啱啦，係啦，係啦，我見到幾位同學都講得好啱啦，係咩啊 ？How 同 why 啦嚇。If you like to discuss something, say for example, you need to describe that kind of the scenario. At the same time, try to explain, try to do some evaluation, the good, the bad, and give the examples, etc. 可能講原因，可能解釋，可能係俾一啲 example， 可能做一啲嘅判斷，究竟係好定差，或者係可能唔同社會有啲咩唔同嘅狀況，咁我哋叫 discuss 嘅。咁當然我哋如果簡單啲嚟講就係咩？好似同學咁講啦 ，how plus why 呢個係一個其中嘅重要嘅寫作嘅模式或者嘅規範嚟嘅，同學要注意下啦。And regarding that kind of the regarding the first half of this question, you need to explain according to the doing gender, sexual essentialism, as well as gender constructionism. Regarding the doing gender, may I recall your memory? It will be able to let you understand how to link up the sex and gender according to the sex category. 咁如果我哋用文字嚟講，佢係講緊 chairman 啦、chairperson 啦，定係 chairwoman 啦？佢係將用 sex category 黐埋 sex 同 gender 嘅喎。係 chair 乜嘢啊？冇錯 chairman 啦，係啦，咁就係我哋講緊嘅 doing gender 啦。如果 sexual essentialism 咧，呢個係 counter argument 定係唔係 counter argument 啊 ？How about the nature of that kind of the argument of the throughout the application in that kind of the question or while doing your summary? Yes， 同我講得好啱啦，係 counter argument 啦。It will be considered as sexual essentialism will be considered as a kind of the counter argument， 因為呢一個 sexual essentialism 係一個咩啊 ？Sexual essentialism would like to mention the good of the biologically determined stuff， 但係呢條問題係點啊？係要證明 the good of the biologically determined stuff 係咩啊？係錯嘅，所以係一個 counter argument 啦。好啦 ，gender constructionism 下邊有4個 subconcepts。咁我哋因為原本有5個嘅，但我同你講過 stereotype 嗰個唔計嘅，有邊4個啊？記唔記得啊？最少用2個嘅喎，邊4個 ？How about the subconcepts under the gender constructionism? Gender role, sexism, patriarchy, and gender stereotype. Yes, you need to opt for 2 out of 4 subconcepts at least in the minimum。咁同學如果有興趣有需要嘅話，不過通常都冇乜需要噶啦。如果你真係好想有apply 嘅話，嚇 you can try to apply other concepts or theories, but it is a must for you to apply that kind of the concept and theories first as highlighted. It will be the requirement for the first part of the question 1. That means it will be for you will be considered as the so-called guidelines to let you know how to provide the better summary for the question 1. Okay? So for the question 2, you need to answer that kind of the questions according to the reflection method. 咁我教我同學點樣寫 sample reflection 㗎啦，就係同同學嘅 everyday life context 有關嘅，係啦，同同學嘅一個嘅 daily experience、personal gender experience 有關嘅。呢個就係咩咧？From your daily gender experience, how you can understand and explain that kind of the body in everyday context. You can try to provide at least one example for further discussion. Of course, if you wish, you can provide second or third example. And what kind of the example that you can give? Say you can try to give the example in different kind of the aspect at home, in the workplace, or according to that different status and position. 咁你可能譬如作為人哋嘅女朋友，作為人哋嘅女，咁其實或者作為人哋嘅仔，或者作為人哋嘅補習教師嚇，咁究竟點樣可以係睇到你嘅 gender experience 咧？咁其實可以講下自己個人經驗。如果有需要嘅話，咁係可以講多1-2個 example 嘅，係啦，唔係就最少一個啫。如果要講多啲都可以。How you can provide the better reflection? I've already let you know how to link up that kind of the reflection in the better way with your personal gender experience in the sample A and B， 就係會考與選美同埋花花女郎選嘅個篇文，咁同學可以 refer 下啦。好啦，咁我哋咧睇一睇 question 2啦。So regarding the question 2 reading, it will be about the Chinese male sex workers in Hong Kong. Again, that kind of the questions will be divided into 2 sub-questions. Regarding the first sub-question, it will be about the summary of that particular reading. In the very beginning, may I clarify that's kind of the 2 important keywords. The first one will be about the gigolos. Gigolo, in fact, will be considered as the male sex worker. 咁呢一個嘅 gigolo 其實就係 male sex worker 嘅另一隻字嚟嘅。咁不過呢個係一個 term， 同學要去留意㗎啦。咁另外一樣嘢啦，咁就係留意呢一個字，就係咧 stigma。stigma 呢個字喺中文就叫咩咧？污名化下。That means how you can trivialize that kind of the gigolo in the everyday life experience。譬如我哋會點樣污名化呢一個嘅性工作者啊？譬如我哋諗起性工作者，諗起我哋叫鴨，或者可能係一啲嘅男性性工作者，我哋會諗起啲咩形容詞？同學會點樣形容佢㗎？係負面嘅，通常我哋叫污名化。得都好。係啦 ，dirty 啦，同我佩奇咁講 dirty 啦，得啦嚇，將佢形容為一啲係動物啦，係而且係一啲咧唔係咁正面嘅動物啦 ，dirty 啦，同咩病有關㗎 ？How about the association with the disease？H 咩啊？通常諗起 H 咩 V 㗎 ？AIDS 啦嚇，性病啦，或者係 HIV 啦，係咪？係啦。How about the moral standard？Good or bad？High or low？ 佢哋道德標準係點㗎？Bad in personality, low in moral standard， 所以我哋會睇到呢係一啲 stigma 啦。咁我哋會覺得仲有一樣嘢啦，同學會點睇個學歷㗎 ？How about their educational standard？ 係啦 ，low 啦。咁呢全部係啲唔好嘅嘢㗎。So many negative labels will be taken on the particular gigolos or male sex workers on them in Hong Kong. So for the first part, you need to discuss how do the male sex workers in Hong Kong experience and manage of the negative labels according to different kinds of the gender concept and theories from the lecture of the masculinity that we would like to discuss after 4 o'clock today as well as the next Wednesday lecture. And because of this question requirement, in the beginning of the lecture or after the 10 minutes break, I will try to let you know that's kind of the concept and theories of masculinities first. 咁就係我會喺一開始4點鐘之後就會話喺嗰個嘅 lecture 就話俾同學知道，其實呢一個嘅 theories 有邊幾個嘅，同學會講咗俾同學知道先嘅。好啦，咁我哋再去睇睇 gender constructionism 啦。咁就係咩咧？喺度頭先同學所講啦。Regarding the gender constructionism, classmates will be required to pick up 2 out of 4 concepts or theories. That means you need to apply, say for example, sexism plus patriarchy, say for example, gender role plus gender stereotype, say for example, patriarchy plus gender role in your explanation. 最少用兩個，用多過兩個當然可以啦。You can try to make good use of that kind of the concept and theories to explain that kind of the negative labels to be experienced or to be managed by the male sex workers in Hong Kong。咁所以同學就係要去留意翻呢一個嘅文章嘅內容 summary 嗰個導向點樣去做啦。喺討論 summary 嘅時候 ，while writing your summary at the same time, you need to pay attention on the application of gender concepts as well as the theories according to the masculinities PowerPoint as well as the at least 2 sub-concepts under the gender constructionism. So how about the second part of this question? So the second part of this question, it will be about the personal gender experience according to the masculinities PowerPoint。咁我哋就會講緊呢樣嘢啦。咁佢就話啦 ，What will be the challenges of being a man in the society, in the Hong Kong society? Of course, the meanings of man here would not be constrained in the gigolo。咁作為一個男人有乜嘢嘅挑戰咧？咁即係話有乜嘢嘅可能嘅 difficulties 係可以抄低㗎。What kind of the difficulties that you would encounter in the Hong Kong society? Say if you were a man in this society。咁呢個 man 嘅意思唔單止包括係性工作者，咁你唔係性工作者嚟㗎嘛？咁所以你可以話作為一個男人嚇，或者係你認為，就算你係女同學，你作為一個男人，你覺得見到男人，譬如你爸爸、你阿哥、你細佬，咁本身或者可能你側邊嘅男性嘅親戚或者係朋友，佢哋面對嘅挑戰係乜嘢？唔一定係 gigolo 嘅。咁同學可以講一講佢哋面對嘅困難。What will be the difficulties for male to be encountered in the Hong Kong society? You can try to provide at least one example for discussion according to your daily life experience. Very similar with the question 1 requirement, classmates will be able to discuss such kind of the example according to different aspects or position。咁如果 aspect 嘅話，你可能話喺 workplace 啦，可能係喺屋企啦咁樣，究竟面對住咩困難，或者可能喺拍拖 dating 嘅時候，咁就係如果同學係講 position， 咁作為人哋阿哥，作為人爸爸，咁都可以講嘅呢啲，係啦，你可以講下嘅，係啦，因為有時候就算你唔係男同學，咁你係女同學，但係你要望到爸爸面對嘅一啲嘅困境，或者可能咧。咁我哋喺呢啲嘅做男人嘅困境，其實都會係喺 masculinities 嘅 PowerPoint 度睇到嘅。咁我舉一個例子啊，我想問下同學，如果係作為一個失業嘅人，我想問下當然對於男同女都係唔好㗎啦，係咪？冇人認為會係好嘅嘢嘛？我覺得啱唔啱先 ？Of course, unemployment or being unemployed, of course, will be considered as a poor stuff, whatever for the males as well as the females。但係如果真係要翻，譬如你失業啦，要翻去同屋企人講啦，你覺得係男人難以啟齒，係容易 feel ashamed 多啲，定係女人係 feel ashamed 多啲啊？咁即係話喺我哋強調我哋傳統 patriarchy， 傳統嗰種masculinity 有 IES 嘅，咁即係意味住我哋喺呢一課裏邊有 N 咁一種 masculinity。頭先我講呢一種主流嘅，只係我哋嗰種大男人嘅啫，主義嗰種。係啦，呢一種嘅大男人主義嘅 masculinity， 或者我哋 PowerPoint 叫做 hegemonic masculinity， 喺 under that kind of the hegemonic masculinity， 男人係難以啟齒嘅，例如失業嘅話。So you can see that under the hegemonic or traditional masculinity, sometimes men will be considered as the victims under that kind of the application of the gender concept or theory。咁呢個同學可以 discuss 嘅，譬如可能攞緊綜援嘅時候，可能失業嘅時候。可能拍緊拖，如果男仔飛女仔，女仔感受當然唔好啦。但係如果女仔飛男仔， 感受都係唔好嘅。但係女同學可能願意將呢件事同佢嘅閨蜜分享，但係男人話俾人知，例如佢可能喺佢婚姻裏邊，如果俾佢老婆飛咗，感覺點啊？你就算未結婚，但係你都會睇過唔少報紙或者聽過啲朋友講嘅。唔好意思提啦，係咪冇面啦？係咪 feel ashamed 啦？嚇！所以大家會睇到 ，even under the hegemonic or traditional masculinity, male to a certain extent may be considered as a victim in that kind of the situation or aspect. And you can try to pick up some of the examples or concepts for further discussion. Okay? Clear? And for the question 3. Question 3 will be about the food binding in the traditional China, especially in the 19th century and the early 20th century China. Of course, before the outbreak of the Second World War, that means in the middle or before the middle or in the first half of the 20th century or the last century. And regarding that kind of the questions, you need to for the first part or for the summary, you need to discuss that kind of the food binding issue as a kind of the mechanism of control for women. On the one hand， 咁因為女性行路行得唔好，咁當然佢哋出嚟做唔到嘢，當然佢哋行到呢一個甩咳咳，咁呢一個亦都係令到女性咧係被控制嘅一個重要嘅原因嚟嘅。但係男性要控制女性嘅時候，一定要揾藉口嘅。So at that period of time, or on the other hand, the patriarchal society or the males or the man-dominant society or the leading males in traditional China by then would like to construct the food binding as a kind of the feminine virtue or so-called the beautifulness for women at that particular period of time。 但係為咗要女性去做呢一樣嘢，控制佢哋，就將紮腳呢樣咁痛苦嘅事包裝成好美好嘅事，咁就變咗係一個嘅令到佢哋好心甘命抵去做。但係喺呢一篇文章裏邊，我哋會睇到一個幾特別嘅地方嘅，我哋喺之後會解俾同學知嘅。有幾特別嘅地方咧，就係話俾同學知道咧，其實喺某啲嘅城市裏邊，咁其實佢比較先進、文明、有錢嘅，咁其實有啲我哋咁佢哋咧，對於紮腳咧係會係紮得犀利啲嘅。點解咧？因為佢哋覺得紮得犀利啲就可以將個女嫁去一啲好啲嘅家庭，然後跟住令到自己屋企有面，甚至能夠促進兩個家族嘅生意來往，或者可能嘅關係網。但係如果係窮等人家，例如係喺鄉村嘅，咁要落田㗎嘛。個同學仲覺得應唔應該紮得咁緊啊？隻腳應唔應該紮得咁靚啊？咁細啊？要揾食㗎係咪？所以求其紮下就算啦，唔係紮瘦3寸金蓮啦。所以同學呢幾位同學喺 chat room 講得好啱啦嚇，佢哋唔會啦嚇。They would like to make use of the more linear mode to have the food binding in the rural areas as that kind of the rigid requirement of the food binding may hinder their agricultural production on the farmland。因為可能紮得太細，隻腳行得唔清楚，點落田耕種啊？所以係咁以紮就算數。所以紮腳都有因地制宜，睇下社會地位嘅嚇。咁但係無論如何，窮嘅係為咗要去耕種，所以冇紮得咁犀利。有錢嘅紮得犀利係為咗要嫁得好，為咗要同兩個家族建立起一個生意或者係緊密嘅來往，所以都係為咗啲實際嘅利益去做嘅紮腳。所以好明顯呢一個係咩？呢一個係有利益嘅盤算存在。咁呢篇文章係講呢一樣嘢嘅。So according to that kind of the reading, you will be required to discuss according to different kinds of the important concepts. Say for example, discourse, power, knowledge, as well as according to the Michel Foucault in the PowerPoint of sexuality. And you need to discuss that kind of the question. And for the second question, you need to explain. Do you think that women's bodies are still being disciplined and controlled in Hong Kong society? Of course, not in the format of the food binding. 咁今日當然唔再有紮腳啦，但係會唔會係新瓶舊酒，用咗其他方法控制女性？咁同學就要諗一諗啦。嚇，係咪例如可能有邊個係有同學會諗到嘅咧？控制女性嘅身體，令到女性覺得有啲地方係細啲就會靚啲嘅，例如係腰。咁嗰啲係乜嘢啊？係今日我哋叫做冇錯啦 ，body shape 啦。嗰啲叫咩啊？ 點樣控制女性啊？我哋今日嗰啲叫咩啊？我哋今日嗰啲叫咩手術啊？審美觀啦，或者係咩手術啊？嗰啲叫做，譬如胸部嘅係隆胸手術啦，如果係腰嘅就係咩啊？抽咩啊？抽脂啦，係一啲 plastic surgery 啦，抽脂嘅手術 plastic surgery 係整容手術啦，冇錯啦。咁所以同學都係可以諗到呢啲係變相嘅一啲嘅答案嚟嘅。咁同學都係要嘗試去討論下啦。So you can try to provide at least one example from your daily life experience to do the discussion. And for that kind of the grading aspect, you may try to refer to the content, organization, as well as the knowledge that is the application of gender concepts and theories. Make sure that regarding the difficulties from question 1 to question 3, you will have the merits and demerits for every question. 咁每條題目都有好同唔好嘅地方嘅。咁如果你講第一條咧，佢係比較短嘅，得10頁嘅啫。咁但係唔好嘅地方咧，就係同學要諗多啲 example， 因為佢好理論化嘅。第二條會比較中間落墨啲嘅，咁就得有13頁，咁但係咧就個 case 好清楚係 male sex workers in Hong Kong，咁咁但係咧呢個咧就係我哋今堂先至，我哋咧本身咧係同學可能咧成日聽 female sex worker，male sex worker 比較少人講嘅。咁呢一個可能同學要去諗或者面對嘅時候，可能會比較難啲去諗嘅。尤其是係 being a man in Hong Kong society， 通常我成日諗女性係俾人恰嘅啫。而家你講男性俾人恰嚇，so you try to change that kind of the thinking mode or angle to think about that kind of the question. You need to think about it. So for the question 3, of course it will be considered as the most lengthy reading. 咁 question 3係最長嘅一份 reading 嚟嘅，15頁。但係佢最好嘅地方就係咩咧？佢 example 俾晒落去嘅直頭嚇，咁都冇乜地方要係諗嘅。最重要其實根本係同學係要用多啲時間去睇嗰份 reading 咯嚇。咁就似乎係容易做好多，但係又會係但係就文章會比較長，英文會比較深。呢一個係question 3最唔好嘅地方。So for each question, it will have the merits and demerits. You can try to opt for your favorite situation to do that kind of the question. But by the way, according to the current schedule, in the next Wednesday lecture, I will try to explain that kind of the question 2 reading for your further understanding. Okay? So I think I've already come across the important criteria or the most important stuff for your further understanding. May I recall your memory again? For the first stuff, there is no any consultation for this quiz nature assignment, that is gender diary. For the second reminder, that I'm going to remind you, that is the answering method. You need to divide your answer in part 1 and part 2. Mixing up your answer in 2 parts would lead to the severe but not some marks deduction. 咁你提一提同學，因為呢一份功課兩樣嘢要注意嘅，提多一次，冇 consultation 嘅，因為呢份功課係有測驗嘅性質。第二樣嘢要提同學嘅就係呢份功課記住跟翻 template part 1 part 2去答，撈埋答唔係扣少少分，係扣好多分。係啦，所以千祈唔好咁做，得唔得？ So may I give you may I give you 5 minutes to ask the questions if you have further inquiry on this? Otherwise, we can take the 10 minutes break. Do you have any questions? If you would like to follow our template, you need to answer, say for example, 600 words for the part 1 question. And for the part 2 question, you need to answer according to the question requirement accordingly. May I take question 1 as an example to let you know that's kind of the answering method. Say for example, for question 1, this will be the question 1 requirement, okay? So, that means you need to answer 600 words on that kind of the parts. Same action will be engaged in part 2. For part 2, you need to answer 600 words as well. And what will be the requirements or what will be the guidelines of that kind of the part 2 question? You need to refer to the requirements of that kind of the part 2 questions. For the part 1 and part 2, I've already made good use of that kind of the Roman number to let you know what will be the differentiation between part 1 and part 2 of the particular question. OK？ 希望答到阿昆侖嘅問題。問我邊題覺得好做啲啊？話呢條問題好難答喎，點答都死嘅喎呢個問題嚇。哦，咁你問我，咁睇下你係你俾個 benchmark 我啦。你係想 reading 容易睇，譬如正林所講嘅就係咩咧？You need to for regarding the 正林 question， you need to strike the balance between you need to strike the balance between the difficulty of the reading or the more simple understanding regarding the question requirements。睇下你想個題目容易做啲，諗 example 容易啲，定係 reading 容易啲啦？你攞個平衡啦。You need to strike the balance on this to be much easier to go through the reading, or to be much easier to think about the examples. You need to think about the 題目容易啲，我唔知題目容易啲係咩意思喎？題條都係咁噶啦，其實都解俾你聽噶啦，都係睇下你諗 example 定係諗你係覺得 reading 咯，因為同 reading 有關係㗎。reading 容易啲一定係1同2。If you would like to do the reading in the easier way, it should be question 1 and 2. For the question 3, the reading will be the most difficult one. However, for question 3, you are not required to spend too many time to think about the example, since the example will be much easier for you to think about it. 但係 question 1 就要嘥好多啲時間。But for the question 1 and 2, you need to spend more time to think about that kind of examples in the reflection part. That is the part 2 of that particular question. Be in the plural form but not in the singular form. That means that's kind of the mescalinity. 陽光氣質 will have many kinds of the options, or will have many kinds of the particular situation. 咁唔止有一種嘅 mescalinity 陽光氣質係有好多種嘅。亦即係意味住係咩咧？ We will be able to understand different kinds of the male image in our society. But in the very beginning, what will be the historical origin for us to understand that kind of the male image in our society? For the first idea that I'm going to introduce you, it will be the situation in the traditional China. And of course, that's kind of the image or male image in traditional China will be very different with the one in the Western world throughout the several centuries. 咁同學要知道啦，喺 traditional China 裏邊嘅 male image 咧，其實係基於咩咧？嚇 ，in traditional China, that kind of the male image will be made according to the so-called expectation towards the scholar politician， 就係士大夫啦。咁呢班士大夫咧，我哋通常係意味住係一班文人咯，佢哋都係透過咩啊？ They would like to make good use of the so-called civil service examination to climb up the social ladder, and they will be good in writing, especially in the arts subjects. 可能係喺呢啲文科裏邊係一啲好精英分子，咁佢哋唔係話好大隻、好大嚿嘅，咁但係佢哋亦都係透過科舉去爬上去呢一個嘅階層。咁但係喺 gender issues 裏邊，咁有乜嘢關係咧？咁有咩要同同學講嘅咧？咁喺 gender issues 裏邊咧，咁我都想俾同學去了解或者知道，其實咧中國其實同學會覺得呢個係一個保守嘅社會啊，尤其是對於呢一啲嘅同性戀或者係對於呢一個嘅定係一個係比較開明嘅社會嘅同學，可唔可以講俾我知啊？喺 chat room 開明係 open-minded 定係呢一個conservative mindset 㗎？conservative 嘅文琪話係啦，咁仲有冇其他人講呢？其他同學可唔可以繼續答呢？咁事實上係唔係咁呢？咁其實你見大部分同學都係答 conservative 嘅，咁證明咧學校嘅講法或者係一般嘅主流嘅講法，令到同學咧，令到係好多人都有咁嘅睇法。咁但係咧，我問得出呢個問題，咁當然啦，其實呢一個係一個 common sense 嚟嘅，但係咧就唔係一個事實嚟嘅。我哋會睇到咧，其實咧喺中國咧，其實咧係同性戀咧本身係同中國歷史咧係共存咗差唔多1000年，只係對於同性戀嘅壓抑咧，只係有200幾年嘅歷史，係200幾年嘅歷史啦。咁所以喺咁嘅狀況下咧，同學要知道咧，其實同性戀點解係會成功咧？其實我哋可以話俾你聽係點解咧？嚇，this kind of the partial acceptance of the homosexuality, of course, would be related to that kind of the marriage system under the Confucian society for long。咁因為喺呢一個嘅主流婚姻制度下係一男一女嘅結合。咁呢種係傳統禮教嘅而婚姻制度嘅結合咧，好明顯係中國傳統禮教儒家思想嘅呢一樣嘢。當然佢係不利於同性戀嘅發展，至少喺家庭上嘅組合。但係調翻轉，只要你滿足咗家庭上嘅組合，有 reproduction 咧，咁就會點啊？咁亦都係咧能夠有香火，咁能夠結婚生子，滿足咗呢一個先決條件。Once you can fulfill that kind of the requirements of the marriage system in the Confucian society, you will have less or fewer constraint for you or for the man to have the homosexual orientation。咁當時呢一個就係因為咧呢一樣嘢咧。只要滿足咗一啲先決條件，例如可能結婚生仔，一男一女結合，咁然後跟住男嘅，譬如士大夫去搞呢啲同性戀咧，其實係唔會任何特殊嘅關係嘅。而呢樣嘅關係其實亦都影響緊咧，係一啲嘅唔止影響緊喺一個嘅平民啦，亦都影響緊皇室嘅。咁我哋會睇到，譬如喺早期，我唔知有冇同學聽過啦。早期譬如喺一啲唐朝啊。係啊，最早期嘅同性戀喺中國幾時咧？The origin to have the homosexuality in the traditional China, of course, would be occurring in the pre-Qin dynasty。喺先秦之前嘅已經有㗎啦，即係話咩咧？喺一個係好幾千年前已經有呢個嘅東西存在。咁但係我哋追翻追尋根究底，咁幾時中國先會變成一個 conservative 咧？去到唐朝仍然係好開放嘅，可能睇到一啲嘅可能譬如你睇到仲記得唐高宗同埋武則天嘛？係啦，其實武則天屬於係佢阿媽嚟嘅，係啦，係庶母嚟嘅，係細媽嚟嘅，係啦。但係竟然一個仔可以因為中意咗個庶母，唔得，最後係立為點啊？最後係立為正妻添。咁所以呢樣嘢係證明咗當時佢哋對於呢一啲嘅傳統嘅觀念咧，其實包括呢啲我哋叫做咧係會比較上係呢啲傳統觀念咧係會盡量係去唔遵守嘅。我哋話喺早期嘅時候係幾時可以遵守咧？同學咁，阿家俊講得好啱啦。Starting from the Song Dynasty, that kind of the situation will be changed to a kind of the so-called tunnel by having the conservative mindset not only in the gender issues but also in the service examination system。咁所以喺宋朝嚟講，對於西方一啲嘅東西，譬如可能火藥，宋朝之 好 OK 嘅 gender issues 亦都好開明嘅，可能同一啲我哋以前咧講緊係同一啲當時嘅今日嘅可能中東嘅國家仍然係有啲叫譬如花剌子模啊嗰啲嚇，中東國家仍然係有啲嘅交流，咁所以仍然會有一啲嘅情況去存在，咁去增進知識，好似所以我哋講喺中國早期其實係有 globalization 全球化呢樣嘢，咁但係去到宋朝之後開始固步自封，開始冇啦嚇，唔單止係呢一個嘅科學科舉，而家可能喺 gender issues 嗰方面都開始進入一個保守嘅年間。去到明朝咧，早期係一個高峰嘅，就有呢一個嘅宋明嘅理學。咁理學就係講緊咩啊？全天理係咩啊？跟住有冇同聽過？全天理滅全天理滅人欲啦。咁即係好明顯咧，即係講緊咧係啦，同我講得好啱啦。全天理滅人欲，咁即係話咩咧？嚇 ，the moral standard would be more important than the humanities。That means we would like to concern more according to the rules of regulation, but not the willingness of the different kinds of the human beings。咁所以當時係有壓抑嘅，但係呢種情況咧，去到明末咧，去到或者成個清朝咧，開始係去崩潰。咁有一種叫享樂主義，and that's kind of the situation or the collapse of the moral system. Of course, would be very able to let us understand the rise of the homosexuality in traditional China again, and such kind of the situation, of course, will be occurring in different classes of the societies in traditional China. Say, for example, in the Ming Dynasty。唔知同學有冇聽過有一個叫明武宗嘅明武宗嘅明武宗嘅人存在啦。咁佢係明武宗，即係明武宗係當時一個明代中後期嘅皇帝啦。咁當時嘅宋儒理學其實開始都有啲崩潰嘅情況。咁佢都係一個好享樂主義嘅人，冇錯啦。同我講係炮房啦，冇錯啦。咁其實炮房係咩嚟嘅咧？係一啲性行為嘅，我哋今日嘅我哋叫南風啦嚇，係啦。咁明代嘅皇帝其實咧，佢本身喺一個月裏邊，其實佢係得少過個禮拜，係得4-5日同佢嘅妃嬪係同寢，咁其他時間咧都同宮廷嘅小太監一齊去玩嘅。咁佢有啲契仔嘅，有百幾個契仔啦，我冇記錯120個到，係啦契仔。咁呢啲係咪真係契仔咧？同今日我哋叫契女嗰啲一樣嘅啫。大家諗到知咩嚟㗎啦？係咪？有次姓嘅叫姓朱，咁大家都知道係咩嚟㗎啦。咁就咁然後咧，咁通常佢哋會係點咧？就會喺個炮房進行呢一個同性戀嘅活動啦。嚇，佢呢個皇帝咁就係除咗嗰4-5日會同後妃一齊之外，咁所以好明顯咧，當時佢有幾人甚至係咁樣攞到高官或者口錄。咁譬如其中一個好出名叫江彬或者叫錢寧，有啲官員揾唔到皇帝，甚至要睇下呢啲男寵或者呢一啲所謂契仔去咗邊度，咁就知皇帝去咗邊度。咁所以咁呢個情況其實喺早期我頭先講過唐朝之前，例如漢朝都有嘅。我哋今日成日聽過斷袖分桃，係咪？就係斷袖分桃，知唔知講緊咩啊？就係漢哀帝斷袖之交嘅董賢啦，就係因為唔想嘈醒佢，於是咧就係將件衫割開，咁就係唔想嘈醒另一半。咁呢啲好明顯話俾同學知道係咩咧？Homosexuality would be popular in the traditional China, especially for some particular era, but not all of the thousands of years。咁雖然唔係全部幾千年都係咁，但係都有一段時間係有咁樣嘅情況出現嘅。所以我哋會去 refer 翻整個嘅 PowerPoint 嘅時候，我哋會睇到 homosexuality in the traditional China to a certain extent will be very popular, will be very popular in our society, not only for the upper class people, but sometimes for the lower class people. But make sure that that kind of the situation would not be considered as the mainstream situation under the Confucian system or under the Confucian ideology。咁呢樣絕對唔係嘅。咁要俾同學知道翻，同西方嘅情況好唔同啦。Very different with the Western situation. For the Western world, that's kind of the situation to celebrate of the homosexuality, of course, would not be the case for the valid explanation. 但喺喺類似嘅時間，西方並唔會好崇尚同性戀嘅，佢哋崇尚嘅係一種異性戀嘅。咁點解崇尚異性戀咧？同佢嘅一啲實際情況有關嘅。We need to understand that very different with the East. The Western world would like to celebrate the heterosexuality but not the homosexuality according to the following reason, which will be considered as the historical origin to explain the rise of the traditional masculinity or hegemonic masculinity in the West。咁所以其實係去支持呢一種異性戀，其實係同呢一個嘅西方世界去講緊呢一種傳統嘅 hegemonic 或者係 traditional masculinity 有關嘅。咁點解有關呢？係因為佢哋喺呢一個嘅西方嘅世界裏邊，尤其是喺呢幾個世紀裏邊，我哋會睇到係咩呢？ That's kind of the traditional masculinity, especially relying on the heterosexual man。對於一啲異性戀嘅男士而強調六嚿腹肌、英雄主義、大大隻隻嗰種嘅情況，其實係咩呢？ It would be considered as a means for the Western world or for the Western society to maximize the commercial benefits under the capitalist economy。咁呢一個係希望利用呢大大隻隻嘅男仔，咁然後跟住咧仲係異性戀嘅男士，然後係咧去加大佢哋嘅一啲嘅生意上嘅利益。咁呢個情況其實係可以睇到乜嘢咧？其實呢個情況可以係追究到咧去呢一個17、18世紀嘅。嗱，呢度寫16啦嚇。其實我哋會睇再前咧，譬如同我應該聽過哥倫布去發現新大陸嘅咯。當然呢一種係一種嘅 hegemonic masculinity， 因為要有好 toughness 嘅。如果唔係點樣做一個征服者咧？呢個字係唔係英文嚟嘅？呢個字係西班牙文嚟嘅。That is the one to conquer. Is the one to conquer another piece of the land outside your home country. That means in the early modern Europe, that's kind of the hegemonic masculinity would be celebrated according to the soldiering and the sea trading。咁可能 soldiering 就係講哥倫布咯。咁而個 sea trading 就係講咩啊？ Sea trading example will be illustrated by the British or the Dutch East India Company。呢一個嘅東印度公司其實喺幾個國家都有嘅，咁但係最著名嘅一定係講緊英國同埋德同埋呢一個荷蘭㗎啦。咁喺近年嘅書籍裏邊都有啲書籍研究東印度公司。咁呢本書係台灣嘅譯本，原文係日本一啲著名嘅學者去寫嘅，一啲教授去寫嘅。咁啊，台灣近年去譯翻做中文，咁樣可以同我睇到咧，喺東印度公司其實佢哋係去做 sea trading 嘅。咁東印度公司我哋可以意味住除咗 sea trading 之外係有征服嘅意味嘅。Say for example, for the case of the India, you need in the certain period of time, it will be governed by the British East Asian Company。印度早期其實有一段幾長嘅時間係由呢一個英國嘅東印度公司去管嘅。同學仲記唔記得中國喺鴉片戰爭之前瘋狂咁輸入鴉片，記唔記得啊？記唔記得？係啦，嗰陣時都係東印度，冇錯啦，嗰時都係東印度公司，英國東印度公司做嘅好事嘅，同學都要知道。係啦，咁所以其實可以睇到咧，東印度公司唔係淨係有 sea trading 角色嘅。For the East Indian Company, they will have the dual roles. On the one hand, it will be considered as the economic role, of course, for the sea trading. But on the other hand, it will be considered as a political role. It will have the function of governance. Say for example, for the colony， 好似印度咁樣。咁其實都去到今日印尼嘅，譬如去到一個地方叫巴達維亞，即係今日嘅 Jakarta 雅加達嗰度。或者同學有冇聽過台灣有一個叫鄭成功，有冇聽過？有冇同學去過台南旅行或者台中旅行？係啦，咁有啲佢啲像嘅，有啲雕像啊咁。鄭成功就係趕走咗當時台灣係殖民於台灣，係荷蘭係殖民於台灣嘅總督同埋佢嘅軍隊嘅。咁呢一個都好明顯話俾同學知道係咩咧？其實喺英國或者喺一個荷蘭嘅東印度公司咧，其實係有咩咧 ？They will have the political purpose as well as the economic purpose to conquer that kind of the land for the commercial benefits。咁但係要成功嘅話就要點啊？ They would like to rely on the heterosexual man or to rely on the traditional or hegemonic masculinity to achieve that kind of the goal。咁呢種嘅情況係會係點樣去進一步加劇咧，或者係去促銷咧？因為我哋要 maximize commercial benefits。可能你會問啦，點解東印度公司會扮演一個咁重要嘅角色啊？尤其是喺19世紀，因為係受咗咩啊 ？And that kind of the scenario, of course, will be intensified by the Industrial Revolution。 因為喺工業革命之後，我哋會有咩啊 ？We would like to have the more machines usage, and you will have the emergence of the entrepreneurial subculture。而最重要嘅係能夠成功。咁呢個亦都係講緊我哋今日第二課。如果你記得一開始我哋咪講緊 masculinity 要計 rational 嘅，有 rationality 嘅就係講呢樣嘢啦。If you would like to have the success, you need to calculate all of the stuff all the time. Say for example the salary。所以你見到今日香港點解有啲商人唔想俾最低工資，其實都係呢一種嘅心態嚟嘅。所以你見到圖畫裏邊喺1909年一張西方世界嘅情況，咁就係喺工廠裏邊，佢哋唔理小朋友嘅生死，就要佢哋因為比較細隻細個可以捐入機器度去做一啲嘅維修或者操作。咁呢一啲好明顯咧，都係咩咧？ It will be considered as the ideas to be brought or intensified by the Industrial Revolution. So you can see that Industrial Revolution will be considered as the kind of the catalyst 係一個催化劑啦 ，to push up the good of the traditional masculinity or hegemonic masculinity based on the heterosexual man in the West。咁呢一個係嗰個東西方唔同嘅情況啦。好啦，咁我哋咧一開始之前咧，我哋頭先我哋講到 heterosexuality 啦，咁我哋咧就其實係 heterosexuality 係咩嚟嘅咧咁樣，咁我哋嘗試去解一解咯喎。咁同學咧去睇翻嗰個 PowerPoint 先。咁我哋 PowerPoint 咧其實除咗 heterosexuality 呢一個字之外，呢一個係一個 first 嘅 gender concept 嚟嘅。Regarding the regarding the hegemonic masculinity, it will be considered as the first gender concept or gender theory to be taught in that kind of the particular topic. But how about the second, third, and fourth, and so forth, gender concepts and theories for the particular topic? I will try to let you know now. So if you have the highlight pen, please highlight accordingly. Apart from the hegemonic masculinities for this lecture topic, I will try to let you know several kinds of the subordinate masculinity. And of course, that kind of the masculinities in the West will be considered as a marginal one. 咁當然啦，以下我介紹呢幾個都係 gender concepts、gender theories， 但係會比較邊緣化或者非主流嘅，同學要注意或者要知道啦。咁第二個要介紹嘅就係咩咧？The second gender concept that I'm going to introduce you will be considered as the gay masculinities. The third one will be considered as the black masculinities. The fourth one will be considered as the female masculinities. The fifth one will be considered as the tenderness masculinities. And the last one will be considered as the metrosexuality. And for regarding the metrosexuality, it would not be considered as the negative one. It would not be considered as the negative one. And of course, for the tenderness masculinities, again, it would not be considered as the negative one. 但係 subordinate 咁解啫。但係第二至第四種呢兩張 slide 就係比較 negative 嘅，呢啲就係。But for the second, third, and the fourth gender concept and theory, it will be considered as a more detached one or negative one in the masculinity. But for the fifth, as well as the last one, gender concept or theory, it will be considered as the newly emerging one, but not related to the positive or negative evaluation. 咁當然啦，第五、第六種就係一種新進嘅一種嘅 masculinity， 但係相對於但係就冇講話好或者唔好嘅。咁但係呢三種，第17張 slide 同第18張 slide 呢三種就比較上係負面㗎啦，同學要知道嘅呢樣嘢。Clear? So for this lecture topic, I'm going to let you know or teach you that's kind of the six kinds of the masculinities as the 6 gender concepts and theories in total. 好啦，我 coming back to the first few PowerPoint slides in the beginning of this PowerPoint. So in the lecture 2 PowerPoint, I believe classmates will still be able to remember the differentiation between the nature as well as the nurture stuff, especially the differentiation between the sex and gender。其實喺頭兩課嘅時候，我哋都解釋過用呢一個嘅nature 同 nurture 去分呢一個嘅sex 同 gender 嘅。咁當然啦，呢種嘅分法會有過分簡單化嘅情況，而且呢種嘅分法咧，其實會唔會真係解到一啲嘅東西咧？就算係你講，譬如你講係gender， 你講係譬如我哋唔好講 biologically 嗰個 XXXY 性染色體解唔到一啲嘅情況，就算係講 masculine 究竟有幾強咧 ？How strong regarding that kind of the masculinity is， 其實都解得唔清楚嘅。同埋呢種嘅 masculinities 係咪 static 嘅咧？個問題係咪咁 simple 嘅咧？其實有啲學者覺得唔係嘅。所以其實我哋喺今日呢一課點解 masculinities 係多咗咁多嘅可能性咧？有 IES 有 plural form， 其實係有一啲原因存在嘅。我哋會睇到一個 point 就係咩咧？If you would like to confirm masculinities in the singular form but not the plural form， 如果我哋將 masculinity 係冇 s 咁樣解，我哋就會點樣去？我哋就會話咩咧？我哋就好似之前咧係咩咧？ That kind of the explanation, of course, will be very similar as the one that we have already explained or discussed in the lecture topic 2. There's the introductory lecture topic elaboration. 就係我哋會話咩啊？ Gender will be considered as a kind of the nurture stuff. Say, for example, throughout the internalization, we will be able to learn some of the cultural practice or social practices in our society. And that's kind of the cultural practice or social practices will be produced or reproduced in our society. That means to be passed from one generation to another. 咁如果 masculinity 我哋係用單數去處理，唔係眾數去處理，咁係乜嘢啊？咁我哋就會覺得咧，佢係死嘅，係會係死物，係比較死嘅，係被動嘅，佢係學翻嚟嘅啫。學完之後係唔會有任何更改，唔會有任何變動 update。咁然後跟住係由一代傳去另一代，咁佢傳去另一代嘅就係一啲我哋叫做文化嘅理論、文化嘅規範、文化上嘅價值觀咁樣嘅東西。但係事實上係唔係咁嘅咧？事實上大家同學要知道，其實唔係咁嘅，因為咧，如果我哋相信呢一套嘅話咧，其實真係咩咧？我哋如果相信呢一套嘅話，就即係話相信一套我哋叫做 sex role 嘅 theory。如果相信呢一套 sex role 嘅 theory， 就意味住係咩啊？ If you have the particular XX or XY。That means if you have the particular kind of the sex, you need to perform the particular kind of the gender behavior according to the particular expectation or social expectation or cultural norms and values. 但係事實上呢一套嘅 sexual theories 有咩問題啊？呢一套嘅 sexual theories 本身會有個問題嘅就係咩咧？ It would not be able to explain the historical change.It would not be able to come across the so-called power relations issue。咁所以我哋先有 masculinities 呢樣嘢先有眾數嘅。簡單啲嚟講，我呢張 slide 係點樣解咧？或者 masculinities 有 plural form 係點解咧？同我睇睇嗰個 whiteboard 啦。So some of the classmates would like to ask why the masculinities will have the IES or will be placed or will be put in the plural form. In the very beginning, we need to understand the meaning of the sex role theory. 咁呢個 sex role theory 就係講緊咩咧？ It will be considered as the gender differences in offending in terms of the differences in gender socialization, gender roles, and gender identities. That means if you have the particular XX or XY, you need to perform the gender behavioral pattern.According to our social expectation， 因為你有某個性染色體，於是你應該做某啲嘅嘢。咁當然喺以往嘅社會可能係啱嘅，的確係好簡單可以處理。所以以前講 masculinity 無可厚非，但係今日嘅社會係咩啊？今日嘅社會係平等咗。同學有冇聽過一啲嘅而家劇集，可能係強調家庭主夫？有冇啊？有冇啲劇集係強調暖男嘅？有冇啲劇集係強調可能係入罪？未必係，或者我哋可能係喺 gender media 記唔記得話我的老婆大人啊？陳錦鴻跪喺孫軒面前，呢啲好明顯都係咩啊？呢啲好明顯都係話俾你聽，顛覆咗傳統嘅 sexual theory 嘅情況。所以同學可以睇到係咩啊？ In the today's society, it will be more egalitarian 平等啊。In the today's society, it will be more egalitarian between the two sexes. That means it will have the declining of the traditional gender roles between the male and the female. In other words, that kind of the sex role theory would be less relevant to do the valid explanation today. 所以喺今日嘅社會裏邊，再用 sex role theory 去解唔 OK。咁所以喺咁嘅情況下，我哋會點啊？所以喺咁嘅情況下，我哋覺得我哋應該係話俾你聽 masculinities 其實係有頭以前嗰種，但係亦都有一啲新嘅方法去解嘅。It will have the continuities and the change of masculinities from the past to the present 喺今日嚟講，因為基於平等社會嘅出現，所以 masculinity 有更加多嘅多樣化啦。如果你講傳統嗰種，就係呢一種 hegemonic masculinity。新嗰啲就頭先我哋所介紹嘅就係咩啊 ？Regarding the new one, it will be considered as the gay masculinity, black masculinities, femme, or even tenderness masculinities, etc. But by the way, may I try to spend some time on illustrating that kind of the so-called former or mainstream masculinity? And hegemonic masculinity will be considered as the first important gender concept for this topic. Regarding the hegemonic masculinity, it will be able to explore the power relations between the two sexes, especially according to the social norms and values. That means according to the existing gender order. And regarding that kind of the masculinity norms, of course, they would like to, or the hegemonic masculinities would like to construct a kind of the so-called macho man 呢種 masculinity 係希望建立一種咧好大隻累累嘅男人嘅，就係、是、我哋叫做英雄主義，譬如好似呢種六嚿腹肌呢一種啦，我哋叫 macho man 猛男。呢一個啦，同學可以抄低啦 ，macho man。And what would be the characteristics of the macho man? Of course, in the very beginning, the macho man, of course, would not have any kinds of the feminine norm. 咁佢哋就唔會有一種嘅，我哋 PowerPoint 講到佢哋第一個 細嘅 bullet point 就話佢哋唔會有一種 feminine norm 嘅，譬如佢哋唔會有蘭花手呢樣嘢，所以我哋會話啦 ，they would not be able to engage the sissy stuff。sissy 係乸型嘅意思啊，譬如唔會有蘭花手，係啦。咁另外啦，佢哋仍然會有咩啊？佢哋會有一種嘅，譬如頭先我講啦 ，success 嘅 norm 嘅嚇 ，they would like to do something in the successful manner， 譬如打交要贏嘅，好似係之前哥倫布一樣，揚帆出海，佢哋係會係點啊 ？They will be tough in doing the or engaging the difficult tasks。對於一啲難嘅嘢，佢哋會嘗試去做，嘗試去 come across 嘅。咁佢哋當然係有一個嘅侵略嘅意圖啦，所以尤其你打交嘅時候，咁當然佢係要係 winners take all 嘅情況，係唔會搖人嘅，所以你見到係六嚿腹肌嗰種，係要開槍殺人嗰種，係啦。And they will have the aggression norm。仲有一種我哋叫做係咩啊？係 sexual powerness norm， 就係一種嘅我哋叫做係就係一種英勇嘅情況嘅。咁本身係一種大家要知道嗰個嘅。即係我哋所講嘅英雄主義啦，咁樣咁呢一種係要俾同學去知一知嘅情況。咁去到今日啦，呢一種 masculinity norm 係會點咧 ？So in the today's Hong Kong or even in the Western world, most likely that's kind of the or in some societies that's kind of the macho man or hegemonic masculinities will be able to be reflected in the media products. Say for example the themes， 好似我哋喺呢一個嘅 PowerPoint 裏邊所睇到嘅係英雄本色周潤發嘅電影，呢一啲都係一啲嘅情況，或者去到今日，甚至去到走入我哋嘅生活裏邊 ，that kind of the so-called macho man will be able to link up with the matters, with the daily matters in our society。咁就係包括咩啊？就係包括咧，可以係喺我哋入咗我哋日常生活，可能將呢種 macho man 或者係 hegemonic masculinities 變成咗咩咧 ？hegemonic masculinities or macho man components will be very able to let you to be successful in having the successful business。 尤其是係可以係通過一種